What's up guys, I'd like to welcome you to this video today. This one is going to be about how to develop devastating power in your spinning back kick. Now in my experience, when executed properly, spinning back kick is undoubtedly the most powerful kick in martial arts. And it's one of my favourites to use in sparring as well, because when you execute it really quickly, although there's a telegraph, there's not much that somebody can do when you're spinning so rapidly. And it's one of those kicks that often sneaks underneath the guard and can really land in somebody's ribs or in their stomach and cause a lot of damage. This video is going to be twofold, so I'm going to be explaining how I feel is the most effective way to actually execute this kick technically, and also how to develop the maximum amount of power through practice and repetitions. I'm going to be showing you it from a few different alternative setups as well. So the only prerequisite for spinning back kick is just having a really nice and effective side kick. But it's the type of side kick where you turn over your shoulder and you kind of stack your weight behind the kicking leg and you turn your body over, as opposed to the other type of side kick, which is more kind of like a jabbing motion where you're not as aligned, and it's much less favourable in terms of generating that power. So this is the kind of side kick I'm talking about here, where I'm looking over my shoulder and my weight's stacked in a very strong position where I'm able to really filter that energy through into the kick. And what I'd suggest before doing the spinning back kick is make sure you've had some good solid practice of doing these side kicks against something really heavy, because side kick's one of them techniques where a lot of people can do it very nicely just standing statically, but it's a different story when it comes to hitting something hard, because you're going to get that feedback of the target that will often push you off balance if you didn't have a really strong position. The main thing people get wrong with this kick is they spin way too far. So instead of thinking this as one big movement, I like to think of all of these spinning kicks actually as kind of a step and a turn into a basic kicking technique. So it's the same with spin hook, which would be step, turn into a basic hook kick. All we're doing here with the spinning back kick is we're stepping, turning over our shoulder and executing a really powerful side kick. This helps us to get out of the modality of just doing it as one big spin, which can get confusing, especially when you're just starting out. You will eventually progress to viewing and feeling this technique as one whole and complete movement. However, when starting out, if you're not viewing it in this step-by-step manner, which I encourage you to do, then it's very likely that you will hit the target, but your body won't be correctly aligned to deliver power with that kick, or you'll simply miss the target completely. Now I implore you to think of this kick as kind of a stepping forward advancing technique rather than spinning on the spot, as the name suggests. And many people do struggle with this kick because they think of just spinning on the spot, and when you haven't got that experience, it's really hard to know where you are in relation to your target, and it makes the kick much more difficult. On top of that, in thinking of it as this forward approaching kick, you're also preparing yourself to be able to use some of these more advanced setups, which will really come in handy later on, especially in generating even more power than the standard spinning back kick. What you essentially want to do in all techniques, and especially these spinning ones, is filter all of the kinetic energy that you generate through a very strong posture in your body to allow it to discharge into the target and be as efficient as possible. Efficiency in this example can be described as having very good composure in your body throughout the execution of this technique, and all of the parts are in alignment, which creates what I call a very strong vessel. Where this vessel is compromised, as you can see in some of the examples here, it might be the arms are swinging out, the core isn't strong, then some of the energy is lost, and this creates what I call an energy leakage. And with these energy leakages, there are almost infinite places this can happen throughout your execution of a technique, and it's your job to spot and eliminate them through practice and consistency. So those are just a few important pointers to remember when you take into practicing this kick. And we're going to go into the practical section in a minute, and I will be reiterating some of those as I actually demonstrate the technique for you. If you're enjoying this video and finding value in it, then please click the like button and subscribe down below. Many people do watch these videos but don't actually subscribe, but if you do that, then it helps the algorithm to suggest my videos to more people that would benefit from them, so I'd really appreciate that. Alright guys, so in this practical section I'm going to give a brief tutorial of how I find best to do this kick, but the main thing I want to concentrate on here is really the elements we need to get in line in order to deliver big power with it. The first thing we're going to do is get into our basic fighting stance, okay? So from here, it's really important with this to have your gravity very central and evenly distributed between both of your legs, because if you think about this with a spinning kick, if I had my weight too far forward like this and I tried to spin, it's so easy for me to fall off balance there, whereas if I'm here I can control myself much more easily and reset myself. The things I'm going to explain in this next section all kind of happen together, but obviously for the sake of explaining it in this video, I'm going to break them down individually. In that starting stance like this, the first thing that tends to happen is I'll move this foot across, okay? So if I'm facing completely towards the camera here, you can imagine the centre line cuts my body completely in half, right? In this stance here, the first thing I'll do is step just past or just to the centre line, okay, to about here. Now what this does is it turns my standing leg and it turns my hip, and I'm almost starting to kind of like look over my shoulder like this. You don't want to go too far with this though, because too many people will almost travel too much on this direction and they'll step massively across like this, and as you can see there, that forces me to turn my back on the opponent, and when you do that you obviously just get lost and it goes to shit. So you want to just step a little bit across. It's also a very small kind of like activation of a movement. It's not a big laboured and slow movement, and at the same time I do that, I begin to kind of like move my whole body in this other direction. So at the same time as that happens, I'm looking forward towards my target, and it's really important throughout all of these techniques to keep your eyes upon the target at all times, otherwise you're going to get lost and not know where you are. Now as I start to rotate through from this step, I look at the target until it starts to feel quite uncomfortable and I can't really look at it any longer, at which point, as I rotate through and do the second part of the kick, I will look over the other shoulder again, so I'm looking back at the target. So at the same time as I step across and I begin to turn over my shoulder here, I'll start to use my arms as well in order to create what's called torque, which is the speed at which an object rotates around an axis and creates that powerful force. A big mistake many beginners make is they do way too much of a big open swing, and obviously against an opponent that's hugely telegraphed and they're going to see it, but also it's not conducive to spinning nice and tightly and effectively, and it actually slows you down. So we want to be relaxed, and we want to initiate very quickly and spin into that movement, okay? So as this one goes here, what I do with this backhand as well, as I've stepped across, is I actually kind of relax this one down, and this is the one that actually creates the torque at the beginning of the spin. This one becomes more important later on. So as I've gone from here, I almost relax this one down, and it creates like a rudder that sort of starts to bring my body through. So after I've stepped across that centre line in order to start, and I've begun to use my hands in this position, can you see as well how I'm in that nice hollow position? I'm not opening my back out like this. This is something we never want in any striking techniques because it's not a strong position, okay? We always want to be in this nice strong position here, rotating across, which is why you need that strong core, okay? And so remember in the intro section earlier how I mentioned you basically want to think of this kick in those stages. So instead of thinking it as one big spin and kicking out, can you see the kick came completely out and was disjointed at the wrong position? Think of it in those stages. So step, turn, side kick right down that line, okay? As you turn through, this foot starts to flatten down as you come into that chamber position here to execute the kick, okay? It's really important that that foot remains in that position until the kick is executed and you retract it in with the rechamber, because if you step across and your foot keeps going forwards, keeps spinning round rather, and you go to like here, then I'm not able to open my hips in the correct position for that side kick, okay, to get that powerful side kick at least. And this is where people end up, they spin round and they go too far and end up kicking like this, okay? Watch how this foot basically remains on that position. If I step, and it's still facing pretty much towards the target there, yeah? You can't open the hips into the correct position if the pivoting foot is facing that way. It's more like the jabbing type of side kick. In order to get that one, like I said, where you really turn over the body, you need to have it where the heel faces the target and the toes point away from it. So it's like that. So now we'll move on to the last part of the kick, which is the chamber, extension and rechamber after we've done the spin. And the chamber for a side kick stays in line with the body and the leg and just extends forward like this, okay? It shouldn't come out to this side, or it shouldn't be over this side, because that's a much weaker position. If I'm kicking generally towards where the camera's placed here, and my chamber's here, it's going to knock my body completely out of alignment, where if it's nice and straight up like this, and then I kick forwards, it should come all down that line, okay? So we need to make sure that we bring it up just like that. You're going to lift this leg up like this. Then, as I kick out, this kick extends, but at the same time I use this arm and keep that strength in the core, and I turn away from the kick. So it's like I look over the shoulder. I'm still looking at the target. You never want to look away like this, okay? But I rotate through and I push that shoulder over. At the same time, let me just show you this way. From here, I step, then as I kick, lift up that chamber there, push, and then back in, okay? So that kind of like opposite reaction is where the power comes from. So as the leg snaps out at the same time I turn over that way, and then I retract it back into that chamber position. And so that's a brief explanation of how to perform this kick. You know, it's not a really difficult kick to do, and beginners can generally, you know, put themselves in the position, even if it is a little bit clunky, and practice from there. But it's a very different thing to get it really effective, to where you can use your whole body and filter that power through. Now, the reason this kick is so powerful, which is the point of this video, is because we're essentially taking a rotational force, and then right at the end we're kind of jolting it forward all in one motion. So it's taking all of the power that's generated in the spin, and then it's filtered into one direction. It's kind of like when those people in the Olympics will swing those hammers and throw them like this, okay? But when they do that, they kind of throw it off in the same trajectory. What we're doing is, it's like we're swinging the hammer, but then we're like pushing it all in one direction, kind of like a Hadouken, right? So that's why it's so powerful. And in order to do that, you need to really, really refine it. Now, there's a few things that I want to talk about in how to do that, okay? So number one, the most important thing is that strong core, as I've already said already. If your core isn't strong, then it's going to knock your body out of alignment, and it's going to create a massive, not even an energy leakage, basically an energy hemorrhage. Like, if your core isn't strong going into it and it's weak and you start to twist, you're going to be totally out of alignment and the power's gone instantly. So very important to, throughout the whole thing, keep that core strong. You see, like, I'm really keeping it nice and strong regardless of what my arms are doing, and I'm really in that nice composed position to unleash that power forwards. So another tip for generating power in this is to have a low center of gravity. Now, don't worry too much if you're a complete beginner about this, because it takes a little bit of work and you've got to have some experience with it to make this really applicable. But generally, kind of like, the lower you sink as you start to kick like this, when I do my initiated spin, you see how I like drop my weight down a little bit from a regular stance. Now, you don't want to start really wide like this, and you can kind of adjust from your normal stance. But generally, if you keep in this position, it creates, you spin kind of slightly lower and then come up into that kick, okay? And smash it through like that. Now, to illustrate this, you can imagine how the kick would be if you had a really narrow stance like this, yeah? It's still going to work, but it's not as powerful as if you've got that really like low and powerful stance. And staying low in that center of gravity becomes even more important when you start to use some more of the advanced setups. For instance, if I was to execute the kick from a southpaw stance instead, but with the same leg. So instead of just stepping and kicking through like this, a really, really powerful way to execute this kick, which just 10x is the power basically, is to step from this stance. You come nice and low through, keeping in line here, and then you spin just as you would normally into the kick. However, you know, when you're doing that step, again, you need to remain in line, because if I step and I'm too open like this, then I've got to spin way further than if I was already here, and then I've got to do it like that, right? Another cool way that you can execute this kick is from a southpaw stance once again. However, instead of stepping forward like we did in the last one, we're just going to simply switch on the spot. And can you see how when I land in this position, this is the perfect starting position that we did from the regular kick to then execute it forward, right? And just that switch alone, if you get it nice and strong and quick, it adds so much more power from just a static position. So it's really useful, and it can also trick an opponent, you know, as you switch, they don't necessarily know what you're going to do from there. But again, you must keep the body in line. If you don't do this and you start to twist, say if I do that stand switch and my sort of shoulders and core get a bit left behind, you see, like, from here it's over. I'm not going to be able to do it from here, or I am, but it's going to then be laboured and slow. We want to get everything so efficient that it's like it just bang bang, it just happens instantly, right? The next thing is, I can't overstate the importance of relaxing during this, especially as you initiate the spin to start with. If you're tense, it's going to fall apart from the start, just like having a weak core. So if you imagine I'm really tense and I try to spin like this, it's like so rigid and there's no fluidity in the movement, okay? You need to get used to being super relaxed, then initiating the muscles very quickly and relaxing again immediately. Because if I am relaxed and I initiate and then I hold the tension, it's going to slow me down. The reason that I can rotate very quickly like this is because I'm very used to starting nice and relaxed, initiating the movement, and then relaxing again as I pull through into the kick, okay? And it's generally getting all of the parts of the body in alignment, as I mentioned in the intro section. So as I step here and I move the arms, even things like if this arm's a little bit too far back like this, if I step and this arm's here, this is creating weakness in the body here, and I'm compromised and I'm going to lose energy as I start to rotate through. So all of the parts need to be in alignment, and this is where the practice and repetitions come in, okay? Step, can you see I'm still strong here? As I spin this one through, staying nice and strong. Again, if I do this one too much and it goes too far, it's going to drag the body out of alignment. Basically what's happening when you do this and you're making these mistakes is you can still get through the kick, but you're having to course correct all the time, and you're having to make these corrections instead of just letting it happen. And when you're making all these corrections, it's like you've already lost loads of the power and you're just trying to get to the end of it now. And as I always say in these videos, you know, you want to work at getting as much of the technique done, whatever it is, as soon as possible, so that all that's left to do at the end is basically extend and unleash all of that power into it. I hope you enjoyed this video today, guys, and found value in it and got some pointers that you can take into practicing your spinning back kick in order to develop that devastating power. You know, like all techniques, how I always say in these videos, it takes practice and consistency, so be prepared to work nice and hard, but you can absolutely attain that level that you desire if you're willing to put that work in. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to my channel, and also consider sharing the video with perhaps your training partners or somebody you think might benefit from watching it as well. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.